Thank you for joining the show today. Julianne Mahoney invited me to be on her podcast. And so I said, oh, well, why don't you come be on my podcast? So we're doing this together, and we'll each have a podcast, and it's also going to be on AOC in a show. So it's called A Dialogue on Healing. And what's your paper? Why did you want to, what are you calling what you're interviewing me about?
So I think the class decided that the podcast will be called Healing, I think it's Healing in the Bayou or something like that. It's a working title. I don't know if it's been official, but yeah, so it's for my class on oral histories of folk medicine. Okay. And we've been talking a lot about healing. And for our final, we got to make a podcast, and so I wanted to do mine on healing in Cajun and Creole culture and do a comparison with Mexican and Mexican-American culture. So, cool. Yeah. So I guess to get started, or you want to, okay.
Of this. Then when we finish all your questions, then we can just have a dialogue about what came out or whatever.
Yeah. Awesome. So maybe just say your name and some background information, where you're from.
My name is Becca Bagno. I'm from Scott, Louisiana. And I started to do healing work after I had a mastectomy in '89. Okay. So basically been doing it for 30 years. Yeah. And I grew up in a culture where traiteurs were a part of everyday life, including my grandfather and other people I knew. And so I started doing healing by other different modalities, and then one day someone gave me the prayer, and so I've had the opportunity to see it from different angles, and I'm really happy to hear that you want to talk about healing in other cultures, not just ours, because this is how we do it here, and healing doesn't happen in a vacuum, it happens in a culture. So if I can look at how it happens in other cultures, then I can see how it happens in our culture. And so we're talking about healing and not cultural differences. And I think that's like, we would not have done this. 30 years ago, nobody was talking about this. Yeah. So I'm excited that you asked. So thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Could you talk about like what a traiteur is for people who might not know?
Yes. And I don't have a paper, but I can give you a paper. I put together something that I called traiteur traditions. Okay. It's supposed to be, that's how it is. But nothing is how it's supposed to be.
Right. No, you don't go to school to be a traiteur, so it's going to be different.
Just think about it. What is a mother supposed to be? Well, you know, we try. I failed. My kids are going to have to forgive me and figure out where. You know, what is a teacher supposed to be? What is a student supposed to be? This is the role and how the traiteur has been a part of our community. But what I found from what we understand as the traditional ways, and when I actually interviewed people, they were not necessarily the same. Mm-hmm. So in this culture, right. And I have a degree in anthropology, so that gave me some background. Okay. I'm not an anthropologist, I just have a degree in anthropology. Yeah. and I studied that so I could understand about cultural healing, because I knew this was because I had been doing the work, because I had been ill. So basically the gift is transmitted through a prayer, a specific prayer. So you might have the prayer for sprained ankles, the prayer for headaches, the prayer for sunstrokes, the prayer to stop bleeding, prayer for earache, the prayer for any number of ailments. Mm-hmm. And so I have the prayer, and I want to give it to you, and so I will tell you the prayer. And then you will either start to use the prayer then, or you'll wait till I die to use the prayer. Because it had a one-on-one lineage. Mm. And it's always man to woman, woman to man. Now,
why is that?
That is, and I don't know how to explain this, right? Because it maintains balance between the masculine and the feminine in the gift itself. Well, how can a gift be masculine or feminine? How can we talk about balance? That's another subject, another way of viewing. I just know that's how it is.
Okay.
I'm not able to explain it, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
Not all cultures are like that.
Right.
Some people, a medicine man does all of this. And so there's no man and woman. And in other cultures, maybe women do it. I mean, I haven't studied every culture in the world. I don't know about the curandero. So over here, that's how it was. Along with a Catholic prayer, usually there's a gesture.
Okay.
Like, you maybe have to make the sign of the cross, or maybe you have to circle the area, or there's just something that is a physical thing between you and this person that you do. Some people, I've been told, when you treat for sunstrokes, you take a glass of water, you put it on their heads, and then you see bubbles come through. That's not how my grandpa treated. So we can't find one specific and say, oh, but that's how it is.
Right.
But we would like to.
Right.
But then that makes you argue with everybody else who doesn't do it like you.
Uh-huh.
And it also is kind of like, this is how it is in my culture, but it may not be that way in your culture. So we don't have to try to, we can just honor and respect and understand that healing is in every culture.
There's not one right way to do,
Exactly.
Yeah.
The source, which can be the general word for God, he loves everybody. He gave every culture the ability to heal each other always. Then when we got so smart, we thought we didn't need that. We're going to bring sterilization. Well, sterilization's good. We're going to bring hospitals. Well, hospitals are good. We're going to bring in, we had pasteurization. We're going to bring in penicillin and all these wonder drugs, and we're going to wipe out everything. Well, it didn't happen.
Right.
So it wasn't wrong for us to do that. So I'm way off the...
No, it's okay. This is all good. It's all relevant.
Let's go to the next question. So basically, there were things about you don't accept money. Well, that's not true. We didn't even use money.
Right.
Okay, like there may not be a fee, but if you came to me and I did work with your family member, then you would give me a gift later in terms of barter, not a present. And so it's hard to translate that to today, right?
Everything's based on monetary. Yeah.
So my daughter sent 2 ladies to see me. And so we understand there's no fee. You don't say thank you. Well, why you don't say thank you? That's bad manners. No, you don't say thank you because I'm invoking source. It's not me. I'm an instrument. I'm a vessel. I'm a hollow bone. However people understand that you're actually interceding and being used in that moment, right? So don't thank me.
Right.
My name is not God.
Right.
Oh my God. No, but you understand, it's really not. So that was a tradition because we all know here that we can help each other. We can be the hands, we can serve each other in the way that God would want us to. But I don't know what's going to happen. It's not my fault. So I can, one, be detached from the outcome and not get into ego in the community.
Oh, yeah.
Because of course, I don't. So anyway, there's that. So these women were coming and they came and it was just wonderful. And then they left and they gave me flowers and chocolates. Oh my God. So I called my daughter and I used expletives because I like to. And I'm like, did they really think I was gonna just like lay down and eat bonbons and love the flowers? I mean, but how do you say, we're gonna do this in a barter, but could you give me a gift card for gasoline because my car is not a horse?
Right.
You know,
Right.
we were more self-sufficient back in the day, and we understood what you needed and what we could give each other because we knew each other, but today we don't. So their gesture was fine, and they kind of got it. But today when we say barter, it makes people feel uncomfortable. I had one guy that came, and he had a thick wallet, and I don't mean because of the leather, right? So whips out his wallet, he goes, how much I owe you for this? I went, whatever you want to give. How much you got there? Oh, well, I can't give you that. Because there's no, we don't know. And how do you put a price on a gift that's priceless?
Right.
But at the same time, it might not bring you what you want. So there are some things that were in this culture. My grandpa came to treat me once. My mama said, "Oh, little Papa's going to come treat you." Oh, well, I wondered if he was going to treat me good, treat me bad, or buy me a treat. Because nobody knew in terms of having conversations or discussions about it, but everybody knew. You knew who lived in every house. You knew what they did for a living. You knew what they did for fun. You knew what they did when they got in trouble, because sometimes you were... So community was not what it is. It's not people living side by side. It's people living together, even if side by side was far in the country. Right. And so often, like, how did you know they were traiteurs? Well, I didn't have to know. Why didn't you know your grandpa did that? I didn't have to know.
It just was a part of...
But my mama knew, and when you needed, you called who you needed. I mean, we didn't have advertising like we did today. And it was just different. You understand? Yeah. It was just a part of the community. And so in the Cajun Creole culture and Native American, because Cajuns and Native Americans and African Americans, and not just Cajuns, European Americans. Right. Let's not do Cajun. Right. Because Cajun, if you do it literally, it's only the people that went to Canada and came here. Right. Well, my grandpa's last name was Pelletier, my other grandpa was Begnaud. And they married a Martin and a Mouton.
Mouton? I'm related to some Moutons.
Yeah. So the reality is, it was my grandpa who was born here, whose parents came from France. That was the traiteur. He was nothing Cajun in him. Right. He married a Cajun, and then so we're like. So I would like to think that this was a French-speaking phenomenon rather than in your blood, in their blood, or in that blood. Right. Which I want to ask you to ask that man or whoever. If African Americans, Indian Americans, and European Americans practiced this, what was common? Just geography. Then French became common, and then Catholicism became common. Right. So does that make being a traiteur an indigenous form of healing? I don't know. Yeah. I always have these big questions. I keep doing what I'm doing, and maybe somebody else can figure it out. Because I don't have to be that smart. And a lot of smart comes from after you argue and someone makes a decision. It's this, and nothing is ever. Right. Okay. Yeah.
I guess. Yeah, for sure. You answer a lot of questions. But one thing that, because I've kind of read some articles and looked at some stuff on traiteurs, and one thing that is common is that a lot of like the herbal remedies that people use were learned from indigenous people like the Chitimacha and the Takapaw.
So this is the deal. Herbal medicine was something we all knew. A traiteur said prayers. But every grandma knew. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, you just used it. Right. You just did it. And then what happened was the wealthier people became more disconnected from nature and less connected to that. And the intelligent people, they kind of did the same thing. And the people in the high socioeconomic realms of the world did that because, it's a social phenomenon, right? And so we still do things like, did you ever have a bee sting you? Or a wasp?
I had a wasp sting me, yeah.
And then they put tobacco in their mouth and chew it and get it wet and put it on the sting?
Somebody put an onion on it.
Whatever. Yeah. So we would do tobacco. When you have an earache, people who smoke would blow smoke in the baby's ears. We still do some of these things that are a holdover, but it's not necessarily something that the knowledge has been held and continued to use, because you know what? We rejected that. And we relegated it to the lesser. And nobody's really lesser. You know, what we did was we relegated folk medicine to the folks, and then the smart people were disconnected. So now we're going to study that and make it something. So we write thesis and dissertations and we put it on a shelf.
Right.
Like, who the hell does that help? You know, so we have to take all of that out and start utilizing it. So I don't know what year this happened, but I had given a talk at the Miles Perret Center here in Lafayette. Okay. And the Miles Perret Center is they offer services for cancer survivors. And I gave a talk to a group there, and someone says, I have something you might be interested in. Well, I'm curious. I'm interested in everything, right? So she says, I'm gonna make a copy. And so she gave me a thesis that was written in 1933 by a man named Charles Bienvenu.
Yeah, okay.
You familiar?
Yeah, Dr. Besser, yeah.
So, wow, and I was so excited, and I didn't know what to do, and I was going to visit a friend in Illinois, and I brought it with me, and I knew like it was a diamond in the rough, whatever, and I'm like, oh, wow. So I called Dr. Bienvenu, because he was my anthropology professor, one of them, and it's like...
Dr. Bresser?
Ray Bresser.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I have to show you this. So like, so then I gave it to him, because like, I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah.
But it wasn't on a shelf. But it had been on the shelf. I don't know how this person, I should know, but I forgot the connection, but like, she was related to him, or...
Okay.
So Dr. Bresser could then like sift through all this information. So what Charles Bienvenu had done a study of the Negro French dialect of St. Martin Parish. Okay, so when I was growing up, you either spoke English or French, you know, and the English that you speak is different in different communities, and so is the French. So you have all these dialects. And then if you do both English and French, that's really cool, because you can laugh on another level. Yeah. You know, like the jokes they're alive, and they happen all the time. So one of my brother's best friends lived down the street, and he'd come visit, and he'd say bye, and we'd say frottoir. You know what a frottoir is? Do you know what a bye is? No, a bye is a number 3 wash tub.
Oh, I see, yeah.
And we were saying rabord, but unless you speak, you can't laugh at that.
Right.
So there's a third level of humor, which is the combination, which is different from you hearing the old things and repeating it. This is, so we interacted, but the dialects were separate, and the French influenced the English, and the English influenced the French.
Yeah.
So you didn't always get each other's jokes, but we would laugh and figure it out. So the professor that was guiding these people who were studying language also guided them to talk about something that was relevant. And so the wisdom of Charles Bienvenu's professor allowed him to go interview. And there are over 500 methods of healing in the Negro French dialect of St. Martin Parish. Oh my God. It's like raw data.
Yeah.
From 1933. So Ray, I give it to Ray, so he goes, well, we have to call for permission. I'm like, permission? If he wrote it in 1933, I'm sure he's dead. But he wasn't.
Oh, wow.
He was like 101.
Wow.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So then Ray, it was at LSU, not here at UL.
Right.
So he called the LSU, wherever they keep thesis and dissertations, whatever department that is, and he got permission from Charles Bienvenu himself, and then he got a copy of it. But you can get a copy on the internet. It's not a secret thing. And so that whole thing includes, sometimes they would make a tea, sometimes they wouldn't make a tea. And if they made a tea, then how many seeds or leaves, because numbers have significance. And so, oh God, Dr. Brusser mined this for the gold or the gems that are in it and explained. And so then he called the nature guy. He called Bill Fontenot, who knows everything about plants. Okay. So he got Bill Fontenot to make a plan to plant these plants around to create the medicinal herb garden at Vermilionville.
Yeah, okay.
And so the master gardeners at the time collaborated with Ray and so we have something that people can use and understand about plants, because we could all use that. Mm-hmm. Because at one time, when the Europeans came here, we were the Amazon forest for them. And then we kind of thought we were nothing. We have an Amazon forest. Well, you know, everybody has medicinal plants in their area that can help people in that area. Mm-hmm. And it's always the natives who shared with the next people.
Right.
So that was common knowledge. You didn't necessarily have to go to a healer for that.
Yeah.
But like some people did it more than others, and so.
Did healers, like, I know the prayer was the main thing. Yeah. Did they also use sometimes like plants or?
But I was saying
everyone used plants. Okay, so wasn't different to churches.
You didn't have to go to a healer who knew about plants. Everybody knew plants, and Bill was so hysterical because he says, you know, these are all weeds, you know.
Yeah.
So how you go get weeds that they used to go harvest in the country, in the pasture, in the canals, in the swamp, wherever in nature, and bring it home and plant it around the house is going to look good. He said, so I'll put a few rose bushes in the front. and so today when people gather, you have to be careful that they don't poison where you gather. Because we poison the ditches. Well, you don't want to collect something that you think is wild, but they poison it every year or 6 months.
Yeah.
You know, there's a whole lot of respect for these plants and where they come from and how to use them. Personally, I never wanted to learn about that in enough detail to use it.
Okay.
Because, do you know people that go to the doctor and they give them 10 days worth of antibiotics and they quit taking it after 5 because they finish?
They feel good, yeah.
And they feel good. If we're not listening to the doctors, they're not going to listen to me.
Right.
And because something is found in nature doesn't mean it's not powerful or potential or have a lot of potency and have potential for harm as well as good.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you put twice as much butter in a recipe, sometimes it just makes it greasy, not better. So if you take twice as much of whatever this plant is, it could do harm rather than good. So I just stayed with the prayer part.
Okay.
But we used poultices, and we used what was around us. And when I was little, my grandpa had a farm. There were farms. We were connected. We were an agricultural society. We just lost that in my lifetime.
Yeah.
We knew the land. My grandpa knew about the moon, not to go dance naked in the moon, but he knew that it affected when you plant something and when you don't plant, when you dig and don't dig, the full moon and the new, you know, they're physically connected to us, and they had an understanding of that.
Mm-hmm. So I want to ask about, so you said there's specific prayers for different treatments. Mm-hmm. So, like, would someone be a healer only for like a specific ailment, or would people heal like multiple, just one thing? Okay.
Now, once you got one, sometimes people give you another.
Okay.
But basically, in this community, in this area, in the Cajun, Creole, Native American communities that make up this area, it was one, anybody was a healer. So what did a healer look like in Scott? Well, it was Doris, who was a cafeteria lady. It was my grandpa, who had a farm. It was Mr. Cadeau and Karen Crow. It was just like anybody that had the prayer. You weren't trained. You just, somebody gave you that, and you did it. We didn't talk
Did you have to want that, or like, if they just gave it to you, then that's it? Like, you're...
Didn't want it.
You would say no.
Okay.
You can say no. People have said no.
Yeah.
And I don't know how it always was, but one of the things that drew me to, and I did a study in ethnography with Jacques Henry at UL, the transmission of the gift. So how do you get this gift? Because we all want it to be such a big deal. It's so natural. We can all do this, right? So it's like the transmission of the gift. Like in the Catholic Church, you had a sacrament. It's an outward sign of the presence of Christ. And like, boy, if you're going to be healed, I'm sure the clouds have to open and the voice of God has to, you just want bells and whistles. It's just really simple. I'll give you a prayer, you use it. That's it.
Yeah.
So when I studied, I interviewed 5 people, and they were all so different. So one guy got it from his grandma, but in a way he never felt worthy of using it, so he never did. So I get mad at all these people. Not really mad, but I'm like, why are you not doing that? Okay. But it just, one lady said her children told her to quit doing it, so she quit. Well, that made me angry too. Who are your children? I never listened to my children, and my children never really listened to me, so why are you listening? But I ran into her grandson years later, and because they had the same last name, we figured it was so cool. And he said, well, she had gotten to an age where it was really not convenient for people to go and for her to serve in that way anymore.
Okay.
So it wasn't like they said, and so she listened to them and she was sitting there. She had served, and it was time for her to do less, not more. Okay. And then there was Mr. Cadeau. Oh my God. Mr. Cadeau lived in Carencro, and I think he told me he had been given 8 prayers. And some of the prayers were given to him by men, and some of the prayers were given to him by women. So that blew away the whole theory of a man has to give it to a woman has to give it to a man. That's traditionally how it's done.
Okay.
So he was just wonderful, and we got to know each other. And when we would, he goes, I don't know if anybody wants this, because today we don't want to be bothered. We don't want to serve. We consider it dangerous to let people just come to your house. It wasn't so. But I have since then met a family member, and I believe that I think someone is doing some of this work. But at the time, you can't give something to someone if they don't want it. You just will. And mostly it was given to someone in the family. But if, as a healer, you saw something in someone and whatever, there were no steadfast rules about anything in life, there or none. But it would be so much easier, but they're not.
Right.
And so then there's that person, Mr. Cadeau. I included myself in the study. And then there was this other guy who must remain nameless. And, you can't talk about your subjects, but Mr. Cadeau is no longer living. So, and he was just so wonderful. Anyway, so this other person was kind of a character. Who's not a character in our culture if you really know them?
That's true.
I mean, really. I was doing a baby book for one of my granddaughters, and it just said, who in your family was a character? And I said, everybody. If you got to know them.
Yeah.
So anyway, so this other guy was a character, and he said that he had given the prayer to about 250 people.
Wow.
Because he was told he could give it to as many people as he could, as long as they were younger. So I'm like, how wrong can that be, right? Because of that, if 250 people are doing it, or at least understand the potential that they have, that they could, should he be punished because he didn't give it to just one? I mean, really?
Right.
And then in my case, I can talk about myself. because I'm still alive, and even though it's part of the study. In my case, when I had the mastectomy in '89, one of the nuns at the hospital told me I should look into healing work. I thought, sister, what's wrong with you? But I didn't. That was my initial. You know, I always have an initial feeling because we feel, right? So, and she wasn't talking about I should learn about healing. I should look into healing. And she and I are friends still to this day, and so, and I used to see her at the nursing home. She'd go treat her mama. She'd lay hands on her mom because her mom was in the nursing home, and she'd, you know, her hands and her feet maybe had, I don't remember specifically, but we saw each other at the nursing home. She was now my pastoral care person, and I was in the hospital. And then I had the time to think about my grandpa. So I'm like, well, if Grandpa treated me for a sunstroking, then I guess I can be a healer, because he was. I mean, but we don't even think of a traiteur as a healer. You know, it's like if you know somebody that's a doctor, but they're your cousin, you don't think of them as a doctor. Right. You know, I have some cousins that are priests. Well, they're just my cousins. Yeah. Oh, but they're priests. So we tend to, but we couldn't do that when you live in community, when you live in a tribe. You know what I'm saying? So remembering that my grandfather had treated me allowed me to say yes. And what the nun had been trained in was Reiki. Okay. So I studied Reiki. I studied healing touch. We had a group that met in Lafayette called the Holistic Wellness Network at Lourdes, at the same hospital that I had my surgery, where I met Sister Hilda. And there was a lady there. Okay. So what's happening is traiteurs are coming to be, you know, we're doing that for a while. There's no healers at the hospitals here yet, but I'm hoping one day. But if not, we'll do it at home. Mm-hmm. So well, I won't say her name. I'm not sure. I don't want people to call her for. Oh, okay. So this lady comes to me, but I went to school with her daughter. You know, we are related. And she goes, "Are you a traiteur?" And I'm like, "Oh, no, but my grandpa was." And who doesn't want to be a traiteur? The thing is, when you study healing and they tell you that everybody can do this, we all are. Whether we do it or not is another thing. Right. But so, no, I'm not a traiteur, but my grandfather was. Would you like the prayer? And I'm like, well, yeah, but you're a lady and I'm supposed to get it from men. And so I hadn't studied ethnography yet. I didn't know the rules didn't matter, you know, and I'm like, it's not supposed to be like that. But I just said, you know, I just got angry or questioned everything. I said, I would love it. So she gives me the prayer, right? And the prayer was Parenté sur Parenté, P-E-R-O-N-T-E-S-U-R-P-E-R-O-N-T-E. We're like, but that doesn't mean anything to me. That's not right. But it's not wrong, right? So what I understood in that moment is, and I could tell her that's not French. It's not, I don't know what it is, but I don't understand it. Mm-hmm. But you know, if some prayer has been given to you and it's been passed down for generations, does it matter what you say? Does it matter what language it's in? Mm-hmm. How many people did she treat and helped with incorrectness? Right. Because she was asking God to help. It was never about her or the words anyway. Yeah. So she gave me the prayers, and then and not long after that, there was a professor of French at UL. It was USL at the time, and so he sent me these prayers from a Mr. Nestor Guidry, who lived between Abbeville and Kaplan, where they have Hebert's Steakhouse. Oh, yeah. I forget the name of the town, but the area has a name.
Maurice? Or no. Okay, wait. Abbeville, Kaplan.
It's smaller than that.
Is it Perry? Wait, no.
I don't know.
Okay, it's fine. Yeah.
My cousin Paula and I went to eat there because they had an article one time about Nestor Guidry living in that area, right? And so we went to eat a steak. It was good too. So he gives me some prayers from Mr. Nestor Guidry that were written down. Well, you're not supposed to write it down.
Yeah, so it seems like it's very secretive. Like you're not supposed to.
Well, it's not
secret. Yeah,
well, how
okay.
much you going to talk about it? I have a prayer, I give it to you, use it or you don't. That's it? What else there to talk about? It's not secret.
It's not, okay. Do some
just-
people like
it's
keep
like
it
simple like
secret?
this.
Yeah.
But it's like, who needs the prayer unless they're going to use it?
Right.
Let's not cast our pearls to the swine. So then what you could talk about? So some people had come to interview me from the Alexandria Town Talk, and I'm thinking, well, I'm not an authority on this. I'm not we got to go see Mr. Kid there. Go see Mr. Kid there. So they were sitting down and taking notes and just, like, and they said, well, this is so complicated. How do you talk about it? And so this is it. Yes, it's not complicated. They come, I pray over them, and then they go home and they find,
Right.
What's complicated? Nothing. What's there to talk about? Nothing. So the whole secret thing is not necessarily secret.
Yeah.
It's just like, I didn't need to know Grandpop was a healer, but my mama knew, so she called him, and he did. But it was sacred, and oftentimes something that is sacred, you want to keep it close to your heart.
Okay.
And if you're familiar with Reiki, they have symbols that were written in Sanskrit that you pass down, and you're supposed to not share that with anybody. So
Unless the person you're trying
Don't
to.
share it with
no. Oh, no.
anybody.
Okay.
unless you don't share it with anybody, and the teacher or the master passes it down. So this is really true. Some of the stuff we say that's funny, we couldn't make it up. So the lady who taught me was local, and that's the first kind of healing I did after.
Reiki.
Yeah, Sister Hilda was doing Reiki, so I go. So you go for your first attunement, you go for your second attunement, Reiki 2, and she says, okay, so y'all need to write these symbols down, which also came with words, and make sure no one else can see them. Like, I don't know where I put my prayers. Like, I never saw them after that in my whole life ever, right? And so it's like, but I still did the work, because then I would say, okay, God, all those symbols, apply that here. Because it's details. We don't have to, it doesn't matter if it's English or French, right? Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter. So getting back to the prayer that I was gifted, Dr. Amelinks sent me this whole paper that listed Mr. Nestor Guidry's prayers, much like the thesis that came down.
Yeah.
But this was really about him as a healer. And so at first I got the paper, and it wasn't right. Like, I wasn't angry, but okay. First of all, he's a professor, not a healer. So what are you doing with that? Okay. Secondly, he was from Belgium, not here. That's another. He wasn't Catholic. He was Episcopalian. He was just studying this. It was like in his file. I mean, and so I processed that in about 20 seconds, and I started to flip through it, because I knew in the same way that whole big thesis later on that came to me, this was something. And so I'm like, and so I came to the prayer that I had been given. And so when the lady gave me the prayer, she said, I'm giving you the prayer for sprained ankles, but you can use it for anything.
Okay.
I'm like, well, how can you do that? I didn't question,
Yeah.
So in some ways, the traiteurs were always specialists. But then she's telling me I can do this general, which is not what I thought. And up to that point, the only person I knew that had more than one prayer was Mr. Cadeau. He had 8. So, every time you learn something, it expands, and it affects everything you thought you knew, because it's like. So I was really happy that Dr. Amelings had given me this, and when I found the prayer for sprained ankles listed in the prayers of Mr. Nestor Guidry, it said, Je suis parent, je suis parent, je suis parent, je suis parenté. You know, it was like, and that means I am related. So the prayer that she gave me almost sounded like parenté, suis parenté, but I knew that wasn't. Je suis parent, je suis parent, je suis parent. Hey, I mean, wow. So what do Native Americans talk about? All our relations. So this was a come together moment from my own culture and incorrect words, which were never incorrect because it's not about the words, right? And the reality of what had been written by Mr. Nestor Guidry, and then all of a sudden I realized that healers do this because it's about a relationship. It's relational. It's about that. And that was just like, wow. Because I had studied enough Native American spirituality and to know this was, but if you just talk to the Native Americans and you don't understand that Catholics do the same thing, and the word universal means Catholic and universal interchangeable. If we start acting like that, then we could have world peace. And it's the same. We don't have to be afraid of cultures that are not like ours. And we can look within ours and theirs and see what you got. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's pretty powerful.
Yeah. So, can you talk a little bit, I guess I don't know how, we're almost out of time, but just, I guess, like, the role of Catholicism, and also, like, does the Catholic Church recognize this? Or, you know what I mean?
Every church is a slice of the society in which it lives. Mm-hmm. So you have to look at the role of Catholicism in my grandpa's time, in my mama's time, in my time, and today. Yeah. You have to understand that in the Louisiana territory, until the Louisiana Purchase, it was illegal to be Jewish. What does that do to a society? I mean, I know there were Jewish people here, right? But you couldn't legally be here. So we have this thought about this country being built on something called religious freedom. Oh, it was not about religious freedom. So the Protestant communities were separate from the Catholic communities, and they grew up differently, different languages. The only reason the French people could come to Louisiana after we got kicked out of Canada is because we had become Spanish, and that was Catholic. But in those days, Catholic was a political term, not just a religious term, and we can't separate them. So the church has sacraments, but this is a gift, and you don't go to church to get the gift of healing. It lives in all of us, okay? And how you acknowledge it, and how it comes out of you, and how you own it, or you don't own it, or you use it, or you don't use it, that's all real personal. So over the years, there's some priests that are traiteurs. The official stand of the Catholic Church is a stand. Mm-hmm. It's like the official dictionary says how we use words, but that's not how we use the words, right. You know. So you have to separate that out, yeah. You know. You can't separate Catholicism from this culture or the gift of healing. Look, it's Catholic prayers in French, and that's how it was continued. So the church was all we had here. The first thing we built was a church. Mm-hmm. The church was the center of social life. It was the center of the calendar. It was everything we really, really celebrate is connected to Catholicism. But there was also a mystery, and there's a mystical aspect of the church that existed. And if you got it, you're okay today, but if you never got it, then you're just arguing religion. So when I worked at Vermilionville and I was doing the character of the traiteur, I always learned more than I ever shared. You know, can share this, poof. But then it was a priest. He goes, "Well, I'm a traiteur," and so how we feel about things as human beings, and understanding that it's about love and that we're all related, and how any institution rules on that are two separate things. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that my grandpa ever asked anybody if he could do that, right? Do you ask permission to own a gift you're born with? So if we didn't ask the church if we could or not, I don't know that anybody's going to stop just because they say they're suspicious. It doesn't have the, I don't know.
Right.
And so here we deal with the Catholic Church, but then any church has, it's not uncommon in churches to say what is or what isn't acceptable. Mm-hmm. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I was just curious.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I'm Catholic. Mm-hmm. Not that good, but, you know, not that bad. So if I go be something else, I would be not so good or whatever. Not so good a Baptist, not so good a Buddhist. I can just stay my not so good Catholic self and try to be better instead of going somewhere else, because the rules apply. And I never understood the mysticism. There's a lot of mysticism that, and a lot of supernatural things that we don't get.
Yeah. Awesome. I guess you've pretty much answered all my questions.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Not, you can ask me some when we play music together or whatever.
Yeah, that sounds good. Cool.
I did have one thing to say.
Yeah.
Did you say traiteuse rather than traiteur? Well, you, in Spanish, you said the difference between the masculine and the feminine.
I've just been saying traiteur.
Okay.
I saw like there is the feminine traiteuse.
Okay. There is, but there wasn't.
Huh.
So I just want you to think about this in linguistics.
Yeah.
Back in the day, you know French like a language, right?
I'm learning.
Okay, so
Yeah.
what is the
Feminine version of doctor. There's none.
Right.
What is the feminine version of a lawyer? There's none. You know, women did not have professional roles. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean they weren't powerful human beings, right? And so French, the language of French being what it is, you could either have a masculine or a feminine term. So every professional earning term was masculine.
Yeah.
Now, today that people learn the rules of French, which have nothing to do with how we use it in our culture or daily, then they want to correct us, and it's
Right.
okay to correct, but they want to make it right, they want to make it grammatically correct, so they say, oh, well then you're a traiteuse. And like, I really don't care. No, it's traiteur.
It's always been used like in that way. That's interesting because it hasn't, like it wasn't a field, not field, but it wasn't only men doing that.
never was men.
Yeah.
Never was only men.
Right.
Here.
Right.
Definitely.
So I wonder
But-
what. Yeah.
But
The thing is, it was a, and I use the word professional, that's not it, but it was, yes, it was a role. It was an outward role. It was a masculine role. So when you stop and think about it, all the earning roles were masculine roles, and women didn't do that. So if a woman was a writer back in the day, she'd have a pen name as a man because they wouldn't. But women were always powerful just because we didn't get recognized. It was my grandma who was the boss, not my grandpa.
Right.
Doesn't matter whose name was on the deed.
Right.
And she wasn't all mousy and scrunched. She ruled. Trust me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, do you have anything else to add, or
thank you.
I'll think of more questions, I'm sure, as I continue interviewing.
Thank you. Just
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, thank
And,
you.
I'm going to text my friend who gave me a book a long time ago on the curandera. And because I lost it, I moved a bunch. And
Get you a copy and then let me borrow it.
Or at least I can find out where.
We can look at it because it's very, very powerful, and for me it's the same thing. But what happens is the gift is the same because it comes from the same source. But if I don't trust that culture, then I'm never going to go to them, and their healing can't come to me because I make a division. I build a wall between me and them. One of the things I learned in study of anthropology was everything we believe is true. But if they believe something that's different from us, well, that's just superstitious. And, no. And what they believe is as true as what I believe. I just never get to know them to see it together. And I'm sure a lot of people think Catholicism is just a big superstitious thing. Well, if that's how you perceive it, that you'll always see it. But our relationship with our faith is really a social thing. Our relationship to God was really what your relationship to people were and the people that raised you. And that's there's another book I'll recommend about that.
Cool.
But thank you, and I hope all of you heard this. I always learn stuff, even, and I'd like to. It's just kind of good that you understand the role of the healer as curandero.
Well, I'm trying to understand.
But you understand, and so that
What we need to start doing, instead of getting wisdom from the folks, calling it folk medicine and putting it on a shelf, is start to honor the wisdom of the folks before we're all not here.
Yeah.
that's important.
You do important work.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Cool. Well,
Thank you.
thanks.